Hello and welcome back to Florida Foodie. I'm Candace Campos.
And I'm Lisa Bell. Today's guest is arguably one of Florida's most well-known chefs. He is the author of several cookbooks and has been recognized numerous times by the James Beard Foundation. Recently, he reopened his namesake restaurant in a new location in Central Florida.
Yes, and we are so happy to be joined now with Chef Norman Van Aken, which you said it's not, don't elaborate, it's just Americanized, Van Aken.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
You are originally from Illinois,
Yes.
but you've been in Florida for a long time.
Absolutely, yeah. My mom and dad would bring me and my sisters down to Miami Beach when we were toddlers, and I just got the bug for tropical weather as an infant. And when I turned 19, I had a friend who had moved to Key West, and I was done with winter. And I said to some buddies, "Where's our friend again?" They said, "Key West." I said, "Anybody want to go to Key West?" And they said, "Yeah, let's go." I said, "When do you want to go?" They said, "Let's go tonight." So we just went to Key West. This was 1971, and in 73, I moved to Key West and with my girlfriend, and she began working in restaurants, I began working in restaurants, and so we've had this relationship with Florida our entire lives.
Yeah,
Except
I mean,
for that first 19 years.
but it's one of those things, you don't have to shovel the heat, but you do have to shovel the snow, right? That's what everyone always says when they're complaining about the heat here in Florida.
Yes. Yeah, well, we still have family up there, and all you have to do is go back there in January, and you're freshly reminded of how painful winter can be.
Yeah.
So you fell in love with the warm weather at an early age. When did you fall in love with cooking and food?
Yeah. Well, I know I fell in love with cooking as a child, but I had no understanding, inkling that being a chef was a road for a person like me. No one spoke about that growing up in Illinois, northern Illinois, almost Wisconsin. You know, people in that area might have been school teachers if they were smart, but most of us, bricklayers and cops. And my mom was a waitress, and she loved the business. When she married my father, she stopped that because she had to raise the kids. But when they split up, not too many years later, she went back into the restaurant business. But still, it was somewhere out there. That was not my life. I did, though, after my brief sojourn into college, and knew that I was going to be not draftable again, or draftable, I was like, well, okay, what now? So I began to get the jobs in the area. Those were factory jobs. So I worked in a glass factory, shoveling glass onto a conveyor belt. I worked as a hot tar roofer, hot like this outside, but up on a roof. Yeah. I worked as a carny. I went from town to town with a buddy, and we were just kids, we were just like
Trying things out.
Trying things out, and just like living that kind
Not
of
gonna do that. Not gonna do that.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I was working the carnival one night. We were breaking the carny down, and I worked the Ferris wheel, and they asked me if I wouldn't mind climbing up on the wheel to move one of the little chairs out of the way so a truck could pull through. I was like, no sweat. I was a gymnast in high school and monkeyed up there to do that. Unfortunately, the Ferris wheel wasn't properly grounded for electricity, and I became totally stuck under that wheel until I kicked myself off, and one of the carny workers saved my life by catching me from hitting the asphalt. Oh. So I took that off the jobs to keep list. And then the other, I mentioned the job as the hot tar roofer, and I was miserable. Just the smell and the stickiness, and it was dust. And then one afternoon, I was working with a crew of 7 or 8 of us lunatics up on the roof, and a giant summer rainstorm came rolling in. We could see it like a movie, and we were like, whew, and then it hit, and everybody ran down, slid down the ladders, ran to their trucks. Yeah, great. Not me. I got down the ladder, but then I got in the grass of the football field of the high school, and I rolled around like a puppy in the grass, like, oh, it's the best. And then my boss, when I was rolling, I hit the boss's legs, and then he was like, "We don't need your kind around here, Van Aken."
No.
Yeah. And he's looking down at me through his sunglasses, and I was like, good, neither do I. And so then I was like halfway home to the rented house that I stayed at with like 6 or 7 other guys, at this time. And I went, oh, rent's coming any minute, isn't it? So I went, and there was one of these newspapers that you would go and get and look for jobs. That was the whole reason. Or you could maybe buy a motor or a lawnmower or something like that kind of a newspaper. And I took it back to the place that we rented, and I sat on the kitchen table and began looking through the want ads, and there was this want ad that said, short order cook needed, no experience necessary.
Bingo.
I circled that thing and I went, what the heck? So I went there the next morning, I had long hair, tied about long as yours, almost as long as yours.
I was waiting to see like as long as hers.
And I tied it up and stuck it behind my high school sweater I dug out of a drawer. And I filled out the application sitting there at the diner's stool. And they looked at it and they looked at me and they said, okay, you can come tomorrow and start. You start at 6:30 a.m. And I was like, oh my God, this is real. And I got home and I realized 6:30, that means I got to be up at like 5. Got back in the car and went to a hardware store and bought an alarm clock.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So that was the very humble beginnings of my culinary career. And you asked how long before I got the bug, and in truth, it took me years because I didn't know. I mean, this was before the Food Network. This was before the James Beard Foundation. This was not a life where people thought, well, being a chef would be great. My girlfriend's father would dig that. No, not really. And so
it has changed over the years, and now that you've mentioned it, you don't think about that, but it does.
And when I got to this one restaurant in Key West, I started to see it. I started to see the possibility working with other people that had graduated from schools for the very first time. This was happening around 78. Or had worked in Europe, especially, those people were generally older folks. And this melange of people that were working in this kitchen in the Pier House Hotel and Resort in Key West, that was the first glimpse I had of, like, this could be a career. This could be something. My aspirations were more about being a writer than anything. I didn't know about being a chef. But I could see somehow this thing colliding with both the ability to be artistic and to cook. I knew how to cook. When you work in a diner or a busy barbecue place like I did also, you learn how to move like an athlete, and you can be fast and you get all that stuff down, but you don't know very much at all about the classics. And that began to be shown to me in this restaurant in Key West. And I was like hooked, like falling in love hooked. I was like, okay, I got to start buying books. I got to get some knives, but I was making very little money, so I couldn't race to that. But I was always good at reading, and so I began to read and tying together the reading with the working. Then I got this education.
Yeah.
I almost went to school, and my chef actually, wrote a letter for me to go to school, the CIA in Hyde Park, New York. But then she changed her mind and said, heck with that. I'll give you a raise, you'll be the sous chef, and I'll teach you everything I learned in the school. So that took me to that path.
And I mean, it's termed founding father of New World cuisine. You went all the way there. I mean, why, how did you get that name, founding father?
Well, people who write articles need to say things.
Don't be humble, come on.
Well, I don't know how much time we have, but there's a period of time where New American cuisine began to be recognized around '76, coinciding with the anniversary of America, the 500th anniversary of America, right? And people began to stop being slavish emulators of French cuisine and feeling like, hey, you know what? We're Americans. We should do American things too. And that began with like the California cuisine movement, people like Alice Waters, Wolfgang Puck, although of course he's from overseas, but he loved California produce. And then there were the people in the American Southwest that were doing modern Southwestern cuisine. And Paul Prudhomme was lighting it up in New Orleans with his blackened redfish and Commander's Palace. And here I was in Key West seeing all this stuff primarily through magazines because it was before television was covering it, and thinking, well, they're doing it there. Do I need to move there so I can do it there? And then it hit me, I should not do that. I should bring it here, do something representational of what Florida's all about. And because of my love of things like history and literature and all that, I guess I was prepared mentally to kind of go in that direction too. And I also, was always very clear that I wanted to make my own menus and have my own voice for whatever I did. And it didn't have a name. No one called it New World Cuisine. And then we were at a meeting with a public relations firm, and they said there was a few of us that were cooking in a similar fashion. This was 1990 in Florida, in Miami. And his name was Ron Sampiero, and he worked for a big hotel group. And he said, there's the American Southwestern food movement, there's the California food movement. You, chef, should brand yourself somehow or another. And that was a little over my head, a little out of reach. And I was like, what will we call it? And, and somebody posited the idea of calling it the Mango Gang. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. No, actually, they said Mango Mafia the first time. And the lawyer in the room said, no, you're not doing that. And I went back, and I was, by this time, reading a book, which is a huge book for me, by a gentleman named Raymond Sokolov, who was a New Yorker that wrote this book called Why We Eat the Way We Eat. And it was a brilliant book, slim book, but brilliant. I mean, I still have that book, and it's underlined like crazy. And it really was about how the cuisines between Europe and the Americas changed so dramatically between Columbus's arrival and then within a short space of 100 years after that. Because quickly, and you could see that, is that with the traders who followed the discoverers, there became ways for people to transport goods and make lots of money in doing that. And the hunger for things that were available in the New World, things like chocolate and chilies and things like that, things that they didn't know they were hungry for, but that perked up their somewhat bland food, like the chocolate right here.
Which you're talking, and all I can do is smell.
I can smell that.
It is so good.
So it was dramatic to see how Europe was changed by America, and America was changed by Europe. And then, of course, we have this other thing which had so much to do with the slave trade and how that affected the cuisine of America and the lives of so many. And so all these things created such a rich treasure chest for me to investigate. And I began to put that hat on to try and figure out what it would be. And having Key West already been in my experience, because I moved from Key West to Miami with my wife in '89. And I had this long period of time with Key West, which I think was really a benefit for me, because I got to get to know my voice in the off-Broadway way, rather than be in the big city and have other people tell me, oh no, you got to do Dover sole with Maine lobster and caviar and truffles. And I was cooking much more in a localized island way down there. And I'd gotten 4 stars to the Miami Herald. I'd gotten my cookbook contract from a division of Random House. Nobody had written a cookbook at all in Florida preceding to me. So things were moving along.
Yeah, and it's my understanding you actually coined the term fusion cuisine.
I did, yes. And that came from me reacting very strongly to a book even preceding Sokolov's book called On Culture and Cuisine by a Frenchman. You might think I'm some sort of a college-educated show-off here, but I was curious. And so when reading that book, which I discovered in this bookstore in Key West, it was a historic book about the way the life of cuisine has changed over the centuries. And this writer, a Frenchman, his basic thing was womankind, has gone back and forth in sort of he called it a lover's quarrel, between high-end, fancy, elaborate food to rustic, maternal food. Back, forth, the argument went on, the dance went on, the lover's quarrel went on, and he was talking about it in this way, with the arc of history going back and forth through time. I felt like, well, why do I have to choose between one and the other? I was learning how to work with things that were high-end chef food, if you will, but I was always loving the flavors of plantains and mofongo and black beans and the local seafood and the local tropical goods. And so instead of choosing one side of the coin, heads or tails, I decided to choose the flipping coin, the turning coin. And in the margin of that book, and I still have that, where he wrote about the lover's quarrel at one time, and then he wrote the word of marriage, I wrote a fusion. And then it's like, that movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, yeah.
You remember how he got obsessed with the shape of that mountain and he was building on mashed potatoes out of it? Something was happening with him where he was transfixed over the idea of this information. I became transfixed over the idea of describing where I wanted to go with my cuisine, and I began to write a paper. And I spent months in between everything else I was doing as a chef in this little restaurant in Key West, writing this thing for myself to kind of figure out where I wanted to go next. I didn't want to follow a bunch of other people's work and be, just repeating what they had done. And so I wrote this paper. It was only a page and a half, called On Fusion Cooking. And it was about how my intention, very intentional, to marry the high end with the rustic. And then coincidentally, some folks were put together a network out of chefs and restaurateurs that took place in Santa Fe, a congress, if you will, on the new American cuisine. And they asked me to join 3 other chefs on stage for one of the hour-long presentations. There were chefs coming and going, wine people coming and going, everybody doing different presentations on the stage in Santa Fe that weekend. With me on stage that day, people will know at least one, if not all, of these chefs. There was Lydia Shire from Boston, maybe not so well known here, but great chef. Tom Douglas from Seattle, and then Emeril Lagasse, Emeril, and then Charlie Trotter from Chicago. The organizer said, we want you to describe why you cook the way you cook. And I was like, what would I say? I've never made a presentation or a speech. And then I looked at the paper one day, I went, maybe I'll just read that. And that's the way it rolled. There were a bunch of journalists that were there in the audience that day, and one of them, a woman named Regina Schrambling, picked it up, and that went on a wire, and that spread across the United States.
And it is amazing. And so from there, you then decided to go to the next level and start opening your own restaurants.
Yeah, I was really fortunate the way life was unfolding for me. People were making way for chefs around the United States to create, personalized vision, regional cuisine, but personalized cuisine. And this was an explosion. And we had a good uplift with the economy at that point in time. And I was ready. I got from Key West to the mainland, and I took a job on Ocean Drive in a storied hotel there. And I was the chef, and it seemed to people probably that I was the owner, but I wasn't. And it was just, oh my God, I was so on fire at this point with, realizing my dreams, what I wanted to do. I'd already written the first book, but I wanted to write another one. And then I had an explosive argument with the owner, who was really, I think, Al Pacino's character model for Tony Montana. I do. We got into a fist fight on the beach that Mickey Rourke refereed. I'm not kidding. Yeah.
Oh, that's not a saying. That's really what happened.
That happened.
Okay.
Mickey Rourke was living in the hotel. It was at South Beach in the early 90s, okay? So that crashed, and I was really down and broke, and I had a contract to write my 3rd book at that time. And so I began to write the book, but then one night I went to dinner with my lawyer friend. We walked into this very popular restaurant in Coral Gables, and a gentleman was sitting there waiting for his table. He said, "Are you Norman Van Aken?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, my name is Teddy Gilman, and if you would like to do your own restaurant, I will be your first investor."
No.
Wow. Well, that makes it easy, right? Yeah.
I still get goosebumps just thinking about the way, I can still remember he was here, I was wearing this coat, he was in a coat and tie.
But everything happened perfectly, right? It's that moment.
Yes, everything happened. There were the tremendous setbacks too, which were all in this memoir that I wrote. But yeah, my mom would say, "Son, when one door closes, another door opens."
Right.
Amen.
Right.
Yep.
So you have Norman's here in Orlando.
Yes. Well, just flash forward 20 years now, yeah. Maybe 30.
With a stint at the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
Stint of 16 years.
Yeah. And then also, which I remember, 1921 in Mount Dora for a couple of years.
Absolutely, 3 years. Yeah. Yes, and I even did a spin back to Key West for a big project down there. But my whole thing has always been, from the very beginning, from writing the first cookbook, was I felt like it was important to give voice to Florida. I think there are people who do a magnificent job doing things for New York City or Los Angeles, California. You know, they have their chefs and they have their voice for those things. But to find representation for what we have here, which is a great place to cook. In Florida, it's a great place to cook because there are so many different influences, so many different immigration, marriages, things that come together in different ways. The fish, the vegetables, the tubers, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
The fruits.
So you opened Norman's in Central Florida on Restaurant Row earlier this year in
Right.
February of 2023. How is that different from, you know, the place you had at Ritz-Carlton or 1921? If people haven't been to Norman's yet, what can they expect when they walk through the door?
Well, physically, it's a lot different because the Ritz-Carlton is going to be a Ritz-Carlton restaurant with, you know, marble and all of the kind of old school feel to it, which is a fantastic opportunity that came my way. Again, by a door opening one night, a gentleman came into the restaurant we had in Miami. Would you talk to us about doing a Norman's at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando that we're building right now? I thought the guy was just celebrating a little bit too much in Miami that day. But he called me the next day and said I wasn't kidding. So that door opened. But what's different is, you know, we have two experiences, if you will. We have the beautiful dining room, although in a much more modern sense, if you will, than the Ritz-Carlton dining room, which I loved. But with the new place, we have a much different feeling. But the thing that's very different is we have this terrace that goes outside. So as the cooler weather comes, we're going to be finding many more guests loving to be out there. And we have 2 private party rooms, which are great, but we're already booking parties for the terrace that seats more like 80 rather than 20. So very different in that way. From a menu standpoint, it is a mixture. I liken it to, oftentimes to, if you went to go see the Eagles play, for instance, would you not want them to play Hotel California?
Right.
Of course you'd want them to play.
You'd be disappointed, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Name
you
your,
need the
name,
hits.
Yeah.
name your,
Yeah.
name, they want some hits.
Yes.
And they want, and the people who come there now, it's different. They're much more of a neighborhood situation. So a lot of people are coming back, you know, 2 weeks later, whereas at the Ritz, it was a lot of people that were there for business and were in town for, this was their
Right.
one time a year in town.
There's something extra special, extra.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing that makes us different is that we have this New World cuisine versus, we're not a steakhouse, we're not a lobster place, we're not, you know, we're not an Italian trattoria, we're not those things. Our menu is distinct. As soon as people read that menu, they kind of will go, this is different. I'm interested, you know, but you have to give, you know, you have to make sure you give everybody a chance too. So there is going to be a steak for the people who want a simple steak and a beautiful piece of fish for people who want a beautiful piece of fish. But I don't want to ever, you know, I'm not chain. I'm not a chain. I'm a person.
Yeah. As a result, I mean, how often do you change the menu?
We're finding that the neighbors really are eager for us to change certain things often. But what we also do, so we change things every 2 weeks. Now, there are dishes that are part of
The staples, the hits.
The hits.
Yes.
The legacy of Norman's is
Yes.
always going to include the pan-cooked filet of Key West yellowtail, which I put on my Instagram thing today because a beautiful version of it came through, and I said, this is the best-selling dish ever in our history. I'm not going to toss this out.
Yeah.
They would kill me. The yuca stuffed crispy shrimp, the Brazilian conch chowder, these are things that are going to be there. But then, you know, I'm always with my chefs and with our vendor purveyors, folks, farmers, and we're talking like, well, this is going out of season. Well, let's fold this in. What about this? We did an episode yesterday for my series coming up, Norman's Florida Kitchen, and the script, there was no script. The camera folks, my producer, was like, I just want you to huddle with your team, talk about what Mamie's delivered on the truck, and then I want to see how you guys and girls talk to each other about the creation of a dish. So that is that episode, and it felt like it wasn't acting. It was just us talking the way we normally would talk. So that's how it changes. The second way that changes very programmatically is that we do chef's tasting menu that roughly changes around every month, depending on things in season. So another part of our day, this visit, has been refining those 5 dishes. It's a 5-course tasting menu with wine flights optional.
Oof.
So when
good.
I was visiting at 1921, when you were still affiliated with that restaurant in Mount Dora, I think I was there, if I remember correctly, for Magical Dining, and I ordered off the Magical Dining menu, which was fantastic. But I feel like I recall a lot of people eating paella and me having a lot of envy about it.
Yes.
She still remembers this.
Yes, yes. And at the time, too, it was something you had to kind of call ahead and special order. Do you still do things like that where...
Call ahead special order?
Yeah.
Not currently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if somebody says, I am a vegan,
Right.
and they tell us in advance, that's great, because we would like to have the chance to maybe do some like marinade on something that takes a little longer. If they come in and they
Yes.
want to eat 10 minutes later, then I gotta
Yes.
factor that in.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. And so you were saying that obviously you love your books and you love writing. So you have several cookbooks.
7.
Yeah, that's a lot of cookbooks. I mean, what keeps you going when writing those cookbooks?
That's a lot of work.
That is a lot of work.
Well, as I said earlier in the show, it's like I thought I'd be a writer before I'd be a chef, and so I like the storytelling and I like the research, and I found that by writing the books, it also gave me a tremendous amount of data for my chefs to be able to. Well, here's the recipe, and we tested this recipe like 20 times, and so this is going to be a part of the new menu. So it's not like me going, I put this much Worcestershire and this much mustard, and I'll be, we'll see what that tastes like. I like to be more organized.
It's like a
about
Norman
that.
University. Yeah. Chef Norman
That's funny. That's exactly what some people have called it over the years. Yeah.
So you brought some brownies today, which, as
Yeah.
we mentioned, smell amazing right now. Do you love to bake as well, or?
I do love
Yeah.
to bake, but our pastry chef, Floridian Rivera, she's the one that made the brownies, and I would love to be able to say I baked these for you, but Glorianne's credit for those. And
They are
they
gorgeous.
smell so good.
What goes into this? Do you know, or is it all, her
There's
secret
like-
recipe?
We have no secrets. She was my pastry chef in 1921, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the family and the band sort of stays together over different things, and so there have been people that our chef de cuisine, Carlos Robles Molina, he has been with me for 14 years.
Wow.
So when you have people
Moving
that-
over from the Ritz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you have people that have been with you for this period of time, you have a almost unspoken ability to communicate.
Yes.
There's some new people too, and that's part of the excitement.
I want to try one of these.
Let's go. Go for it.
I want you to try them too. Ladies first.
So what's next? I mean, it feels like you're always having something down the pipeline. What's next for restaurants, for cookbooks, for your special?
Well, this will be the first time we're going to be going into the full winter season. So what's next, in many ways, is dealing with what we know will be the major uptick in business and the maturation of our party business. Because, if you've booked parties, and I'm sure you both have, usually you're making your decisions 6 months beforehand.
Yes, at the
And
latest.
And
Yes.
since we didn't know when we get our license and our permitting and all that done,
Oh my God.
I feel like these brownies are going to be
I didn't
on
mean to
some
interrupt you.
there's
but
just
my
a
Lord.
little.
holiday party list.
And there's- we were out of hashish, so
I'm giving you 2 napkins because I just touched
I might
these.
need like 20 of them.
Put one on my plate.
Oh my God, these are so good.
Yes.
This
Okay.
might be the best brownie I've ever had.
I'll tell her. Actually, she'll listen to the show.
There's some crunch on top.
There's crunch on
Yeah,
top.
these are crunchy little chocolate doodads.
And then it's like ooey gooey.
This is amazing. Is that caramel? What, yeah.
It is finger licking good. Oh my God.
And there's like caramel oozing out of the center of it.
I know.
It appears.
They'll be oozing out of the center of me soon.
Right?
She made another dessert for us this morning that's going to go on the new tasting menu. That was like a churros, carnival food, but done through Glorianne's lens, and similar chocolate and caramel at the same time, which is always a hit. Plus some homemade vanilla ice cream, which I love that warm and then the cold at the same time.
I can't even imagine this with like warm with ice cream.
I don't want to eat this anymore because I want to enjoy this.
I
and
hear you.
My Lord, this is so good.
Thank you.
What is your favorite dessert item on the menu?
I know that the guest's favorite item right now is the flancocho. And that is a hybrid idea that Floridian has come up with, and they're just raving about it. I'm dining at the restaurant tonight.
Ooh.
So what will you order?
I don't know. I know the chefs want me to try different things, so that's okay. Yeah,
And when you
That's a
dine
good
there,
job
do you
to
go
have.
back into the kitchen?
of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
You go incognito? I'm just kidding. Like
With like a big
diner.
mustache, yeah.
I don't think they'd be fooled. Oh, chef. Come on now, chef.
What is the most popular item on the menu?
The yellowtail has always been the most
Okay.
popular item on the menu, but you know, it's a thing about our restaurant is that it's fascinating. If I was to sit around a table with the people who have worked with me over the last 25 years, we could have 8 of us there. They would be arguing with each other as to what was the best dish. There could be 8 different choices. So it's not going to be, they're not going to say yellowtail across the board.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to say the yellowtail, somebody else is going to say the rum and pepper painted grouper, somebody else is going to say the barbecued Mongolian veal chop, or they're going to choose appetizers. You know, it's a body of work. I mean, I've been doing this a long time,
Yeah.
and so there is a body of work. And no, it's not the paella by itself. I mean,
She needs the paella.
I know.
we do paella.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, one of the menu categories in the original restaurant was pastas and paellas because we were into it. We had these beautiful wood-burning ovens that we could do that with.
Something about the presentation of paella. I don't know. I
Delicious.
see it and I want it.
I don't blame you. I might have to go order it, and they're going to. It's not on the menu.
Well, thank you so much. Where can people find you online?
Well, they can go to www.normansorlando.com. That's the restaurant, and then my own personal, which is a mixture of things about the books and about my upcoming video series, which is my name, Norman Van Aken, www, all that. Yeah.
We really appreciate you coming here and chatting with us today. You have become a household name in Central Florida and across the country, really, but certainly in Orlando. And we appreciate that this is delicious. And I can't wait to have even more in the very near future. Beginning with some paella.
Right? Well, it was
Yes.
so nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you both.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we can really sit down and enjoy this.
Thank you for listening to Florida Foodie. We'd also like to thank our guest, Chef Norman Van Aken. You can find his business online at normans.com and normanvanaken.com. Be sure to follow Lisa Bell online. Search Lisa Bell News on Facebook and Instagram, or Lisa Bell News 6 on Twitter. You can also find Candace Campos on social media. She's on Twitter, just search @CandaceNews6. On Facebook, search Candace Campos News 6. And on Instagram, search Candace Campos WX. Also, a big thank you to our technical producers, Derek Mosier and Ryan Haley, and our director, Bob Myers. I'm the show's producer, Thomas Mates. Please take the time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you stream podcasts. And you can find videos of all of our podcasts on clickorlando.com and YouTube. Just search for Florida Foodie.